right, we're back. We're back. That's all we know. We're back. I got an off-topic question for you.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've tried this or not. So this happened to me during the break. So we took our break for coffee, which really was a break to catch up on stuff.
Yeah.
And I hop into my email. Do you do a lot with like DocuSign?
Not as much as you do.
Yeah, I do a lot with DocuSign. And there's probably like 5 or 6 different platforms we see that do DocuSign. So you have your typical DocuSign that actually is DocuSign.com. It's kind of like TiVo now. Everybody calls recording stuff TiVo. And everybody calls when you electronically sign something, you sign it DocuSign. So there's DocuSign. Then there's a platform that I see a lot of banks use. And then there's platforms that I see a lot of insurance companies use. So there's all these platforms. Platform I see a lot of banks use, because you sign your name on the phone. If I sign my name, it says my signature is not valid. It won't verify it. It wants to see more lines. If I just do this, it says it's valid. So if you look on these signature cards, it's all this with my signature inside of it because I can't seem to get it to work. So that was my thought of today. Technology preventing me from signing my name. John, if you're watching this from Cogent, it's Cogent that this happens to as well. So you'll see my signature with a whole bunch of like squiggly lines in it to try to be able to sign.
Promise it's a Donnie.
Yes, it's me. I was just sitting there. All right, so next up, hurricane protections for condominiums. My notes say, again, let Kyla take the lead. I'm lost in House Bill 913.
Let me find it in the statute. There was not much of it. It's kind of scary, the change, but it's not that much effectively.
You go through.
Well, it's about the cost of removal and reinstallation of hurricane protection.
Correct.
Previously, it says the unit owner is not responsible for it. If you have to remove or reinstall hurricane protection, if the association needs to get to its common elements to fix its common elements to maintain it. The change says now, unless otherwise provided in the declaration as originally recorded or as amended. So it provides a mechanism for the association to offset the cost of the removal to the unit owner. Okay. So this is not something that you would normally find in the declaration, which means that either newer declarations for folks that are just being developed now, or the associations that are in existence now will have to amend their declaration to basically say, if you've got hurricane protection up, and we, the association, need to maintain our common elements, and we need to get back there. If you want the unit owner to pay for that, you have to amend that into your declaration. Otherwise, it's an association expense. And I've already done that for proposed amendments. I've already drafted that for at least 3 different associations.
And so, because I don't have any associations I know that have that in there. Right now, as it stands with this law, if we need to gain access and we need to take down shutters or flood barriers or any of that kind of stuff, the association is responsible for those costs.
Correct.
Even though the unit owner installed all of that and put it up. Okay. Just wanted to make sure that's my clarifying. I have another line for video conferencing, but I think we hit on that in the first section enough. If anybody missed it, must include a hyperlink on the agenda. You know what we didn't talk about, what we probably should have, so we're going to talk a little bit more about video conferencing. Something that, and if I'm wrong, I need to fix this because I've already told my team this. Video conferencing now requires a conference call number to dial in on, which it didn't used to. So we used to have video conferences, and this was very common. So at Newell, we use Teams, and the reason we use Teams is it's just a very easy solution to run enterprise-wide. Yeah. When we use Zoom, the Zoom side of it, there's a couple of issues we run into. One, it's based off of a single Zoom account. So if you've got let's say that the association owns the account and there's one admin who's the manager. If that manager becomes sick or they're in a car accident or something, we can't remotely launch that Zoom meeting without their credentials. With Teams, anybody in Newell can launch a meeting for anybody else. And so it makes it easier if there's something bad that happens. Also, we like Teams because it did provide us the ability to do recordings, and we can even do transcripts off the recordings, which Zoom could do as well. But Zoom only provides the conference number call-in on an elevated license agreement. It's normally, you actually have to pay extra for that conference bridge. So we need to make sure that any of our associations that are using Zoom, we have the higher level license for it. So that's one thing we probably, and I think that's correct. If I'm wrong on that.
That's correct. It says it must have a hyperlink and call-in conference telephone number for unit owners to attend.
So that's a new change there. So we will make sure to include that with the rest of our video conference discussion. Next up, we have annual meetings. So there are some changes in annual meetings.
There are.
First off, for annual meetings, if participation is by video conference, a quorum of the board must be present, correct?
Correct.
What happens if they're not?
I don't know.
Fantastic.
What happens if they're not? There is no consequence that's drafted into the statute right now. It doesn't say that your meeting is null and void. It doesn't say that, you have to redo everything. It just says you have to have a quorum of the board present in person if you have video conference annual meeting. Now, that doesn't mean that you also can't have a physical place. You are required to still have a physical location. Just the fact that you are offering this annual meeting via video conference will now require a quorum of the board to be physically present in the location of the annual meeting. So what happens if not a quorum of the board shows up? Likely, I think what's going to happen is the DBPR is going to provide some penalties, monetary penalties. That hasn't happened yet. I'm anticipating it to happen. And it's basically a fine for not following the statute.
I don't know if you know the reason for this. The question that should be posed to our legislator, why did they add that in?
I don't know.
I mean, because a lot of these, I can see bad actors. Like, I get some people, may be trying to do some not great stuff, and that's why it's here.
I think maybe there have been instances, and I've seen a couple of them, where we hold an annual meeting and the board might not have been beloved in the last year. And so instead of showing up in person to kind of guide the annual meeting or take accountability for their actions, they show up via Zoom with a camera off and muted. So they watch everything, these board members, but they don't participate. And maybe it's a way to keep them accountable.
I mean, I would think that, if they're going to do that, they're not going to be on the board anyway the next year. So I'm just not sure what we're gaining by it. But now, does that apply if it's a conference call?
No. It says conducted by a video conference, and we know that video conference is a defined term.
So if we have a situation where we know we can't get a quorum of the board together for a board meeting, or for an annual meeting, and usually this happens, we see this in some of our older associations where the documents will have the annual meeting at like some bizarre point in time, like October 2nd or something crazy. And it's hard to get, there'll either be nobody here or, hard to get them together. And so they've been doing it via conference. So that's our workaround for that. Or it's our way to being compliant.
Alternative.
Our compliance alternative. Electronic voting changes. I also note on this one, Kyla can take the lead.
This is a big change.
Yeah. I know there's a 14-day requirement to consider and something about a 25% petition.
That's not even the big change.
Also, we need designated email addresses.
Let's go with the 25%.
Go for it. No, you take the lead, boss.
So if I'm an association and I don't want to do electronic voting, which electronic voting is a third-party platform that allows you to vote online, so you can vote over the internet anywhere around the world for your board of director meetings, changes to your declaration, approval to borrow money, whatever it is that's a membership vote, you can vote anywhere online or anywhere around the world online. But you're a reasonably small association, everything costs money, and it's more expensive to do that than to just do the regular limited proxy. So as an association, maybe you make the decision, we're not going to do this. Now the statute says if at least 25% of your voting interests petition the board to adopt a resolution to have online voting for the next election, the board must hold a meeting within 21 days after receipt of that petition to adopt the resolution. And then the board must receive the petition within 180 days after the last scheduled annual meeting. So you've got a 6-month window after the last annual meeting to send in this petition. And then if the board receives this petition, it's got that 25%, then the board is now required to adopt online voting for the next election. Now, it's interesting because it says election. It doesn't say the next membership vote. I think they use that word because we know that there's supposed to be an election every single year.
We had an interesting situation. The third-party election, first off, I'm a huge fan of online elections and larger associations. And up until recently, I'm now on the fence about third-party e-voting for contested elections. I liked it. In the past, I've always recommended it because it kind of gets us out of the middle, to be honest. Because the management company is hired by the board, and there will always be a perception that and the fact is if you look at the contract, and we have to do this by law, the board gives the management company direction. Like our contract actually will say the president of the board officer will be the one that's giving the instruction to the management company. So what we've seen happen is we had a situation, this was very recent, where an association, we knew it was going to be a contested election, and the board had already decided they were going to go with having a third-party company. I forgot who it was, but it was one of the more reputable ones. that company became so upset with the email volume they were getting from the owners that they backed out. And so we had a conversation with them, and they agreed that they would stay in if we hired a third-party election monitor. So this was, again, it was a very contested election. Pick up my little box. I have a little box that helps me see if you guys can hear us or not. And so I wanted to keep an eye on it. What had happened was this was a contested election, and there was association appeared to be split into two camps of almost 50%. And there was concern on both sides that there was going to be cheating in the election. They were getting, I would say, and these were some pretty upset emails, and there were probably 8 or 9 each day that were coming in to us, and they started carbon copying. I don't want to give their name, but let's say it's Ballots R Us. So Ballots R Us is getting these emails, and they're basically saying, we hold Ballots R Us responsible for this, and there was a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Ballots R Us became upset and said, listen, we don't want to have anything else to do with this thing. We're canceling our contract, which is a real problem.
It is a real problem.
We don't know how we're going to respond. So there was a phone call that happened. They had sent that email, I think, to me as the owner of Newell, actually. And so we had a conversation with their representative at the time, and the representative said, okay, we're going to send an email and say that you have to hire a state-certified election monitor to handle this, and everything has to run through them. So we hired the state-certified election monitor, and we got through it. Afterwards said, listen, we don't ever want to work with these people again. We're done. We're not going to do this again. And I think the election monitor basically did the same thing too.
Yeah.
But what it caused me to realize is that if you have a heavily contested election and you're relying on that third party,
I think it depends on what it says in the contract.
well, if it's a 30-day notice and your elections material went out 60
True.
days ahead of time and they're getting this stuff now, they're canceling, and you've got a problem.
Yeah.
So I still think electronic voting is great, but my encouragement to all of the Newell folk would be, if you are doing electronic voting, make sure you have a contract that says they have like 90 days to cancel you or something.
Or they can't cancel if there is an election that's ongoing that's going to be, within 90 days or something.
Yeah. What else do we have on that? Oh, the designated email address. We skipped all
let's
over
talk
that.
about that, because this new provision says, unless the association has adopted electronic voting. So if you adopted electronic voting, you don't have to worry about this. But if you have not, the association is required to designate an email address for receipt of electronically transmitted ballots. Electronically transmitted ballots must meet all the requirements of this subsection. What does this mean? Well, if we don't have electronic voting, where you can vote for a contested election online, inevitably what is required in a condo association are these envelopes. And these envelopes with a ballot going in the ballot envelope going in the outer envelope, writing your name and your information and signing the outer envelope. The DBPR rules say, if you don't sign the outer envelope, or if you do a whole bunch of stuff that's not right, you invalidate the vote. And so there were several elections that I have been part of that, first of all, I hate invalidating votes because I want people to be able to vote for whomever wants to be on the board. But if you're not following the rules, that are very regimented, by the way, but if you're not following the rules, I'm going to invalidate your vote. And so the legislature basically said, let's throw that out the window. The legislature now says, if you don't have electronic voting, which would allow you to vote online, then you have to designate an email address for the receipt of electronically transmitted ballots. In the past, you were not allowed to email your ballot to anyone because you had to do the envelopes. Now it says, if you do not have electronic voting, now you can email it to this designated email address. And so now we've basically thrown these envelopes out the window. You can now email your ballot to this designated email address, which I think is a pretty large change to the way elections have been done for years and years and years.
And to go back on it, because I'm sure we're going to talk on this, we always do, we have our annual meeting simulation, which actually Kyla comes to as well.
Yeah.
I think Elvis Presley won last year. I can't remember.
Or Taylor Swift.
It was Taylor Swift. I can't remember.
It was a T Swift year.
Yeah, we had a runoff maybe. I don't know. So if I email in my ballot on Monday and I change my mind and I email on Tuesday, the Monday ballot's the valid one that came into the email.
Yes, I think.
We'll have that for sure by the annual meeting simulation.
The DBPR rules today for these envelopes say we are taking the first received envelope.
But
I say I think because I'm using the same rule, but I don't know because it doesn't specifically say that. It does say that if you're going to, so previously the format for our ballots, they were pretty bare bones. The name of the association, date, time, location of the annual meeting, and then the folks who are running in alphabetical order. But now if we're going to allow people to email stuff to you, it does have now a space. So a ballot that's electronically transmitted, not e-vote, but emailed to that email address, must have a space for the unit owner to type his or her unit number and also their name, which also functions as the signature for the owner for the purposes of signing the ballot. And then this statement: waiving the secrecy of your ballot is your choice. You do not have to waive the secrecy of your ballot in order to vote. By transmitting your completed ballot through email to the association, you waive the right of secrecy of your completed ballot. If you do not wish to waive your secrecy but wish to participate in the vote that is subject of this ballot, please attend in-person meeting during which the matter will be voted on. So our format's going to change for our ballot because we have to have that there in case somebody wants to email it to us. I think more importantly, we have to have an email address that is accessible by management to make sure, because the unit owner may transmit his or her ballot no later than the scheduled date and time of the meeting during which the matter is voted on. So if we're going to have an annual meeting at 6 p.m., we need to have a computer, likely a printer, for all of these ballots that are sent electronically. I'm not sure, and I don't know this yet because we haven't practiced it yet, I'm not sure if it's prudent, especially if we have a portfolio manager. I think there has to be an email address for every single association or something.
Sure on
I don't
that.
know. I don't know yet.
So I've been thinking about this, and we can spitball this. And I promise you that, so I think next week is ACAM. So I have a feeling this is going to come up at ACAM, which is in Savannah this year. So it'll be, But my plan was to create a group mailbox. So we have group mailboxes set up for different things, whether it's invoice processing or insurance or any of that. Set up a group mailbox, vote at newellpropertymanagement.com. And I'm going to have people that are assigned that are going through there. And as they take something and they tally it, they move it to another folder. Since it's a group mailbox, all of the managers can access it. So if you're a portfolio manager and you're going to a 6 p.m. meeting, you would just open up that group mailbox and see if there's anything that related to your association that came in after that day and hasn't been filed. And I think that's the better way to do it. My worry about having one for each association is multiple fold. The first is, again, so I always think about worst case scenario because it seems that it happens in management. We have had, since I have owned Newell, 3 instances where I can remember managers getting into traffic accidents of varying severity on the way to an annual meeting. And you've got hundreds of annual meetings happening every year. Even, it happens, not every year, but, I've owned Newell for 15 years or something like that now. So it's happened a few times. What happens if that manager is the one that has access and now they can't go to that meeting? Right. And nobody can access the email that was in there? What do? We have to come up with a backup plan. So somebody else from Newell is going to have to be doing that. Now, obviously, if it's a minor fender bender, it's not a big deal. They can access it. But if they're going to the hospital, I don't expect them to, tell me who voted for who on your way to the ER. So that was our plan there.
I don't think that there's one way to do it. I think you do it in a way that will assure the owners that whomever decides to vote electronically, that their vote will be seen and counted. That's the way. I think there has to be a way of printing this stuff out, maybe even at the annual meeting, which is going to be logistically something to think about. Because what if somebody sends it in 2 minutes before it starts? Well, we're right there.
You don't have to print it out.
You don't. You just have to make sure that you're not double counting it. Or
right. And printing does make it it's easiest to have it either all in electronic format or all in printed format. I agree with that.
Yeah.
And that's one of the challenges that exist with the e-voting as it is right now. If somebody submits a paper ballot after they voted on e-voting, the e-voting is valid, right? And the paper ballot's invalid.
Yes.
But if they submitted the paper ballot before the e-vote, then the paper ballot's valid, not the e-vote. So there has to be, obviously, date stamps, which we do right now. We have to almost timestamp stuff. But when this ends up coming out is when there's a contested election and when this all gets dug into. To be honest, on our contested elections, I can only think of 4 elections that Newell has ever done in 15 years that's actually gone to being contested.
Sometimes there's only one management company personnel at an election, even if it's contested, because then we've got somebody, that person can figure out who's already voted, who hasn't voted. We've done that ahead of time. I think we're going to need more than one.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting. So there is a best practices recommendation that the attorney is at every annual meeting.
Yeah.
And I would say every one of our larger associations does it. Medium and small, our medium associations, it's hit or miss. Small associations, if you've got 4 units, there's one, I won't give the name, but there's one I think I just invited you on. They're 4 units. They're all on the board.
And they're decisions for themselves.
They are. They're absolutely incredible. We do not need the attorney to be at that meeting. If you've got, I think it's the best practice, but to have them there just as another set of hands. I will say I was incredibly impressed. This election that I was referring to that we had the problems with the e-voting, having the election monitor was fantastic.
Right.
Because we had at that meeting, and this was not a large association, but we had 2 Newell personnel at that meeting. We had a attorney and we had the election monitor, and it was barely enough. Now, at that meeting, granted, one of the Newell people was fully remote because we were concerned with, and that's another concern I have with these video conferences. It's difficult to host a video conference, monitor the connection, know that audio is working and all of that while you're the property manager in the meeting.
Right.
And I think we're getting to the point soon where it's funny because I had a meeting a couple days ago about on-sites. How much support does an on-site manager need? When we have an on-site manager, they shouldn't need anything else. But when they try to run a meeting,
Right.
there is absolutely no way you can take minutes, run the agenda, and handle the online side of things together. So one of the Newell personnel was remote. Where I was going with this is it's useful to have other hands, and we will be trying to identify that. Of course, all of this adds in cost to the associations, and associations are very cognizant of cost. This is off topic, but one of the things Newell is going to be getting into more of is trying to find ways to have cost savings to our associations through other vendors. We've started dipping our toe in that with our bulk cable and stuff. There's a company we're trying to work with to help with that, but to find a way to offset costs. But management's going to be more expensive, is where it is. And you need to have your attorneys at large associations should always have their attorneys at annual meetings.
Very least, if there's something contested or if there's some hot topic issue that the owners are going to show up in en masse about, definitely have your attorney. I would love to be briefed ahead of time. That's something that we have.
Don't do one of these where you're like, I got all these questions for you.
Come on to the meeting. Nothing's going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I see what we're doing.
Come have a cup of coffee with me. We're going to hop onto a podcast and ask you a bunch of questions about some legislation that went into effect 17 days ago or whatever it was.
No big deal.
Oh, 22 days ago.
That's right.
All right. Now, for the one that has me worried, budgeting. I'll let you take the lead on this.
So it only applies, I say only, but it happens quite a lot because costs are high. It only applies if you have a budget that you're proposing for the next fiscal year where your assessments exceed 115% of assessments from the preceding fiscal year.
And that's a pure 115.
We do remove the
Yeah.
cost. Now, this is also a change in the statute. We do remove the cost for anticipated expenses. Wait, hold on. Shall exclude any authorized provision for required reserves for replacement. So we remove the reserve. We removed anticipated expenses of the association, which the board does not expect to be incurred on a regular basis for the repair and replacement of these items, so the SIRS. So we removed that. Yes.
Okay.
Regular reserves and SIRS, and insurance premium. What has been removed is the assessments for betterments of the condo property. That was so vague that the legislature said, okay, we're going to strike that. And out of this 115%, we removed regular reserves, SIRS, and insurance premium.
To clarify, when we compare our 2 years of budget, we're going to compare, going into our next year, our 2025 budget minus all of our reserves, not just SIRS, but whole reserves, and the insurance premium. We're going to compare that to our 2026 proposed budget, which is going to be exactly the same thing, minus insurance, minus reserves.
Correct.
And those two. And if it's a 115% increase, then
we do this. The board is now required to simultaneously propose a substitute budget that does not include any discretionary expenditures not defined, by the way, that are not required to be in the budget. Now, what is actually required?
everything that we just excluded.
Right.
Flowers aren't
Everything
required.
else is operating. So we have to propose the substitute budget.
I mean, I guess an argument could be made that there are some things that would be required. That, I mean, I guess management may or may not be considered required, but your taxes are required.
Yeah.
You can't get around that. You can't get around DBPR filings.
Required.
Not required.
Required, right? The word required means you have to do it.
No, but your audit would be required.
Correct.
or review or compilation or whatever the financial.
I think the term discretionary expenditure is so open-ended. I mean, discretionary to you might not be discretionary to me. It might be essential to the functioning of our association.
And the problem with this is it's basically, do you remember back in the day when we had to have the budget workshop meeting?
Yeah,
Well, we're going back to that.
right.
I feel like what we've done is in this piece of legislation. So for those of you that, it's probably what, 10 years ago, I don't remember now. There used to be, when I first started as a manager, you had to have a budget workshop meeting. And then you would come up with your budget, which would then get distributed out to the owners as well. And then you would have your budget meeting to adopt the budget. And the legislature went through and they're like, this is kind of ridiculous. We're doing one meeting to come up with the budget, and then we're doing another meeting to approve the budget. Let's just get rid of that and go to one meeting. But now we've kind of come up with this because the board is going to have to just do a budget workshop meeting to come up with what they want their budget to be. If it's 115% based on that formula, they're going to have a second budget. So you're going to have double or triple the amount of time going into the creation of a budget.
So if you're 115% more, now what happens? You have to draft a substitute budget, which is a big change, by the way, because previously, if you're 115% more, then the owners would have to send a petition for the consideration of a substitute budget, and the owners were required to propose a substitute budget. So now it puts it in the hands of the board without having to look to the owners at all. That's a big thing that's new. And then you are required to propose this substitute budget at a budget meeting before the adoption of the budget. So you have to have a budget meeting before the actual budget meeting.
Which brings us to the budget workshop.
Right.
Not a workshop, but it's actually going to be budget meeting A and budget meeting B.
Right. It's going to be budget meeting A. So we have the budget meeting A, which I think is a membership vote.
And that's where I'm getting confused.
It's a membership meeting because you have to send a notice at least 14 days before the budget meeting in which a substitute budget will be proposed. And you have to send it via mail, email, or hand delivery. And then you have to have an affidavit that you must now put on your website. Unit owners must consider and may adopt the substitute budget at the meeting. A substitute budget is adopted if approved by a majority of all voting interests, unless the bylaws require a greater percentage. It is a membership vote. If a substitute budget is not adopted, the annual budget previously initially proposed by the board may be adopted.
What happens if you're at 115%?
We are up to, yes, so push to maybe 114, and then we don't have to worry about it.
So at 114%, then you don't go through.
And then we stop. Don't put anything else in the budget after that.
And then I think, and all of our associations, I can't think of any one of my associations that isn't actively trying to find a way to be as efficient as possible. What concerns me about this is twofold. First, a lot of associations gave up things which they probably should have been doing because insurance was going so much going up. And now as insurance is coming down, they want to offset that. The problem with our formula
is calculation.
Right. So the problem with this formula is that so for a lot of our associations, their insurance has doubled. So you went from $100,000 to $200,000 in insurance. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to get rid of the mulch. We're going to get rid of the flowers. We're going to get rid of all this stuff. Now, the problem that exists is based on this formula, when the insurance comes down $100,000, that is going to push you over that 115% limit if you add it back in, because you don't get, even though your budget might go down, your budget could go down and you still have to get a membership vote because it's not taking into account the insurance. Conversely, let's say that let's say that your insurance didn't go up. I promise most of our associations were impacted by STRS.
Yeah.
And so they tried to cut stuff. Now, they're trying to find ways to bring that back. And this is, I think we're going to see a number of membership votes. And then on top of it, you're going to have your management and office expense costs are going to be up, if nothing else, by 20 or 25%. Maybe not that much, but you're going to be seeing increases to that. You're going to have a website cost. So that's actually a required cost, though, right?
Yeah. If you are a condo association that's 25,
you're going into this, all of those website costs wouldn't be part of this calculation, which means that now we're going to have to find a way.
Remember, it's required reserve.
But I thought it was. I thought there was things that were required for the association.
No, it says any determination of whether assessments exceed 115% shall exclude authorized provision.
Oh yeah, you're right. I'm thinking about the second budget. The second budget that they would propose would have to include that
discretionary expenditures.
And we've been trying to find a way to just eat that website cost as part of the management fee, but we're really needing to break that out as a separate thing and have it as a separate line item
Yeah.
for the associations because of that.
Prior to all of these changes, you could do that. I'm not sure that you could justify that now with all of the requirements that must be on the website. That's a tough ask to ask.
All right. Well, that was fun. Anything else in budgeting that we should go over?
No, other than it's not going to be fun.
Noopers. We also will be having our. Do you come to our budget?
Sure.
If you'd like to, you can come.
Sure.
So we do a.
Let me know.
Yeah, we do our budget simulation meeting. So you can come to the budget simulation meeting if you want.
Start asking questions. Is this 115%?
Please.
Did we have this? Did we have that?
We had. I don't know. Were you at the annual meeting where we had my mom come in and
I think so.
for Johnny Cash? So we had an annual meeting where Johnny Cash was running. And he was behind on his dues, and my mom came in about Johnny Cashless and him being a deadbeat, and we had to, even though he won the election, so that was.
It's really important that stuff, those things get brought up. And I love that you all have this simulation, because when it's happening in real time, you need to know how to respond. And I mean, these are things that I deal with on a daily basis, because by the time it gets to me, it's high conflict. But as managers, hopefully you don't have a lot of huge conflict situations. But when membership meetings come around, that is a place for huge conflicts, and you should know how to respond when things like that.
Yeah, and trying to find ways to de-escalate. We were talking about these DBPR things. I mean, every management company I know gets DBPR complaints about its managers or its associations or it itself or whatever. We had these conversations among the owners and the CEOs. 90% of them aren't valid complaints. DBPR will have to do something, and we're going to have to spend time on it. But they're complaints because somebody feels slighted, or it's a communications issue. And if we could just resolve that at the meetings, that really makes our lives. You spend 10 minutes de-escalating a situation, and a meeting will save you 10 hours later on of trying to resolve a DBPR complaint and answering questions where the DBPR is like, listen, we don't even want to be involved in this, but we have. But you've got to give us an answer. Why did you do this? Reserve funding changes.
So instead of 10%, $10,000. So regular reserves, nothing to do with CERS. Regular reserves, you must have reserves for exterior painting,
roofing,
and anything else that costs $10,000 or more to replace or deferred maintenance. Now it's up to $25,000. Which is really good, because $10,000 is not as much of an expense these days as it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. So now we're at $25,000, and there's a provision in there that says that the DBPR can change this value year over year based on inflation. So I think this is going to work very much the same as the estoppel fees, where the DBPR is allowed to change the amount of estoppel fees year over year. How do we find that? Every fiscal year, 2 or 3 months, I just Google DBPR estoppel fees.
What are they? I don't know. So she just said that. I'm making a note because Dual hasn't changed it since $200. That's on our to-do list. It just keeps, that actually was on that bulletin board over there to look it up.
All right, so.
I think it's over $250 now.
Yes, it is over $250. The statute, as it was written, says that you can charge $250 for a 10-day turnaround. Then expedited is $100 extra. And then if delinquent, $150 extra. So this was as of...
We'll figure that one out later.
This was like maybe 4 years ago. The next update will be released July 1st, 2027. Delivery estoppel, not more than $299. So it gives you $49 extra.
$299?
It's now $299. And then expedited basis, instead of $100, it's now $119. And then delinquency, instead of $150, it's $179. So write that down.
Yeah, we have to figure that one out. Well, we do ours through HomeWise anyway, so we don't have like a direct link there, but we should check on that.
Yeah.
Because we're losing money somewhere.
So I think that's going to work the same way, very close, or if not identically the same way when it comes to the reserve calculation from $25,000 and how it goes up.
All right. And that's all for the non-CERS reserves anyway.
That's all for the non-CERS reserves.
I think I put this in. We're getting to the point as managers that reserves are becoming so complicated and nuanced. We're just going to end up needing to, which we've always thought it was the best practice to have reserve studies done. But we're going to end up having to say reserve studies have to be done. And either building that into our management contracts or, and...
Well, if you have a CERS, you're required to have a reserve study.
Yeah, the 340 buildings. But becoming complex. Sirs, the deadline is now December 31st, 2025.
Yep.
So there was another attorney that I was speaking with, and he reminded me about, this was probably when so SIRS came out, what, 2020?
Something like that.
And I went to him and I was so worried about how we were going to be compliant with SIRS. And he reminded me of the elevator. Do you know what I'm talking about? The
retrofitting?
Yeah, the retrofitting of the door lock mechanism, DLM. So there was, years ago, my understanding of the situation was that there was a tragedy where a young girl in a hospital went down an open elevator door into a pit. And the legislature said, okay, this can't ever happen again. We need to have locks on doors so that when an elevator door, there's an outer door and an inner door on an elevator. When the outer door opens, that the elevator cab has to be there. This can never happen again. And they said, we're going to make this, it has to be done within the next year. And then it was the next 2 years.
To be done later.
According to him, it ended up taking 10 years from the time that they said it was supposed to be, that they ended up saying, okay, this is when we're going to make this happen because it was so complex. And he said the same thing's going to happen with this SIRS legislation, because I think it was supposed to be in like 2023, right? And then it was 2024, and now it's 2025. Although I think that, it might get extended one more time, but I think most people are compliant as of now.
Yeah, so, because it wasn't like the elevator situation, it wasn't all elevators. It was a smaller percentage of the population that had 3 stories or higher and was required to have SIRS. I think most associations are almost there if they're not there.
I think we'll actually hit that one. But it's good because, we had a couple of associations where, the theory was it had to be done by by January of 2025. So if you passed your budget in 2024, you were good, right? Mm-hmm. So I think people were working off of that. So we have some that are just finishing up some details on their SIRS.
Yep.
I actually think there's maybe one association left that doesn't have their final SIRS. SIRS funding options.
So this is interesting, and I'm not sure how it's going to shake out. I think we're all going to kind of wait and see and understand how that looks like, because we know that our SIRS, like our other reserves, were funded traditionally via your regular assessments. Now the statute allows you to fund it via special assessment, a line of credit, or a loan. So how does that work? I'm not sure. First, if you get a loan, and most of your loans are funded through special assessments, but how much are you loaning? Are you loaning for, it makes sense to say we're going to get a loan for how much we should have already had, right? If we're going to catch up.
So let's say we get a loan. We're going to get a loan. We need to have our roof done in 5 years, and we need to have X amount. So we're going to get a loan for the amount that we should have. You don't want to take that money and be paying interest on it, right?
Right.
So you just have an agreement for a loan from the bank, and you pay origination fees, and you have a draw that starts 5 years out. But the problem is, we need to get a banker in here. Who's going to loan?
Let's get Sean.
Let's get Sean in here. Sean, where are you?
We're going to get Sean and make him talk all about this, because that's separate from a line of credit. And I don't know how that's going to work either. Okay, so if you take out a loan, that means the money is in your bank account. Does that mean that you're going to be funding your SIRS and putting that money in your bank account into your SIRS? Which means that you must adopt a special assessment to pay the bank back. They're not going to say, oh no, let's just give it to me when you use it. They're going to say, start paying me back right now. Previous to this, I already advised my clients, if you needed to catch up to where you're supposed to be, although the statute didn't say that you can use this type of funding, it probably won't stop you from doing it. Because regardless, the point is you need to have that money readily available to you. Okay, so now it's in the statute. That's great. Now we can do that. The catch-up part. Are you loaning for the fiscal year? Are you loaning for the next 5 years? Or are you going to open up a loan for the whole life of that item that you're trying to fund? I don't know, because the statute doesn't give us those parameters. So could you take the position that I'm going to take out a $7 million loan to fund my entire roof? Maybe, but that's not really the way SIRS works. That's not the way reserves work. You're supposed to fund it year over year. So maybe you do it for that fiscal year and then pay it off that fiscal year. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that works, because if I was an association and I don't need to have my roof done yet, I would want to read that as statute in a way that says, well, I have the loan capability to take out that money when I need it and not fund it at all.
Well, that brings us to the line of credit, because now the line of credit, you can open a line of credit, but you don't ever have to take that money out until you need it. So do you open a line of credit, which will require, I think, a membership vote? So what does it say? A special assessment, line of credit, or loan secured under the subparagraph and related details must be included in the financial statement. That's not the provision. It requires the approval of a majority of the membership. Something like yes. Special assessment, line of credit, or a loan under the subparagraph requires the approval of the majority of the total voting interest. That's not a majority of a quorum. It's a majority of everything.
That's a little more, because used to we could waive reserve requirements.
Not for CERS.
No, I'm saying before.
Yeah.
Used to, when we had reserves, we could waive reserve requirements, reserve funding requirements. We could.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would be interested in seeing, because I would think I could get I wish Sean was here, but banks have been fantastic. Many banks, not all. Some banks they don't even know what a community association is.
True.
But banks that work with community associations recognize how stable that funding is, and they're very much willing to work with them. So I would think I could, talking with, any of our banking partners, we could get an agreement to have a 7 or 10 year loan where the draw doesn't even start for years out. And so if I have a $7 million loan with a draw starting 5 years out for construction, does that meet the requirement of that statute? And I wouldn't be paying interest because I wouldn't be doing the draw until 5 years out. Right. Actually, we have an I won't give the name. It's an association you work with. It's one of our larger associations that has a very interesting loan that they said it's like a 12-year term loan that had 4 draw schedules in it across 12 years because they had all of their projects lined up. And it basically took the place of their reserves because they hadn't done reserves. So if somebody had something like that, would that meet the requirement?
Very likely yes, because it doesn't say anything. There are no parameters. It just says you can now fund your reserve with these items if your membership agrees to it. I think most memberships will agree to it because then it's not, it basically provides more flexibility. So you're not taking out of pocket today, I guess, what you can take out of pocket tomorrow.
But at the same time, it almost feels like it's doing the exact opposite of what I thought the CERS was trying to do.
But the difference is that there is that money is readily available because that is what is required. That money has
was
to be
always readily
immediately available for access by the board. It wasn't available if it wasn't in the bank account.
The boards always could have gone and gotten a loan.
Yes, no, because some of their well, it doesn't change it, I guess, because I was going to say their documents might require a membership vote, but this requires a membership vote. So, yeah, I think they just put it in the statute. They just codified it.
I can't think of an association that couldn't have found some bank to loan them money for a capital project and use the right of assessment as collateral. You know what? Nobody's given this idea, but what we need to do, because we have a couch back here, actually, we should get an insurance agent. We should get a banker. It'll be like the, what was that called from that show about doctors? The mind meld or something? Brain trust.
Yes, a brain trust.
We could have a brain trust.
Yeah, I think that's definitely needed for this reserve stuff, the insurance stuff. It's big stuff that has changed that we really kind of.
Next time we're going to do that. All right, we talked about CERS funding options.
Pooled.
We forgot that.
Talk about that. So there was discussion internally at my firm regarding whether these pooling. So now you're allowed to pool 2 or more reserves by a board vote and no longer required to get a membership vote. So that's significant because previously, if you had straight line funding of reserves, if you wanted to pool it, that means that you are using money that's allocated for one reserve item and allowing the use for the others, which means you required a membership vote. And as we know, with CERS, there has always been this guidance from the DBPR that you could pool it, but it was never actually in the statute. So now the statute has changed to allow for pooling of both CERS and non-CERS reserves. They're not allowed to be combined, but you can pool these 2 separate buckets without a membership vote. And so that was the question is it only for CERS or is it for all types of reserves? Well, if you look at the statute, once it's updated on the statutory website, the Florida statute website, it's not in the CERS section. It is in the regular budget section, and the language says an association's reserve accounts may be pooled for 2 or more required components. And it says reserve funding for components listed in paragraph G, which is the CERS, may only be pooled with other components listed in G. So those 2 sentences to me says you can pool these two types of reserves as long as you make sure G stays with G. This is significant because sometimes we couldn't get a membership vote, not because they didn't want it to happen, but sometimes we have members that are apathetic and they don't vote at all.
Yeah, this is one of the, there's some good changes. Also, I know I kind of pick on the legislature a little. There's definitely some good changes in here. And I think that everything that they were trying to do comes from a very good place. I think that, the insurance changes, I was very excited about that. Now I don't understand it, but I was very excited we were doing it. All of this, I think, is good changes. I wish it'd come 2 years ago.
Right.
Because
some things have been taken, some actions have been taken
that
would have been unnecessary.
Had this law existed in 2023, we would have had so much less pain. It's astounding. Emergency powers regarding the mandatory evacuation order.
But the word mandatory has now been struck.
Okay.
So the word mandatory has now been struck, and it now says that the association, unless prohibited by the declaration, the board, in response to damage or injury caused by an anticipated or anticipated in connection with an emergency, as defined by the statute, may exercise the following powers. Require the evacuation of the condo property in the event of an evacuation order in the locale. It's not mandatory anymore. It just says, hey, you guys should evacuate. And in response to that, the board can then say, well, while it's not mandatory, it's now mandatory for us.
I don't know if you were involved in a couple of ours from before, but we were trying to get opinions before some of the hurricanes. For those of you who may not know, we had a very, very bad situation that happened in a prior hurricane that resulted in a death. And so we've been super sensitive about trying to force evacuations of people who do not want to evacuate. And so the last few hurricanes, we've been really...
Let me read the last half of this provision. If a unit owner or other occupant of a condo fails or refuses to evacuate, for which the condo property for which the board has required evacuation, the association is immune from liability or injury to persons or property arising from such failure or refusal. So think about not just people, that's the most normal thing that we think about when we say evacuation. But what about your stuff? Well, it now says that if mandatory to the association evacuation, then you will be immune from liability or injury.
Right.
So important.
Fantastic. All right, we'll take a little pause here.
Sure.
All right, so now back to the last 3 items, which are the items also that I have some questions on. Well, all of them I've had questions on.
And maybe my answer is going to be, I don't know. We're going to have to come back to it.
Now, according to the DBPR, condos have to register by October 1st.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you done that yet for anybody?
Nope.
Yeah, I haven't either. We know what the information is that needs to be registered. We have a list of it. We've compiled it for pretty much all of our associations. There's a little bit of a question because I think one of it is about when the COI or certificate of occupancy is.
Right. So we have to reach out to our local officials or local government agencies to get that information.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's actually in the insurance information too. So that's been helpful. And it was required. So do you recall, 3 or 4 years ago, we had to register everybody for SIRS?
Yes.
3 times?
Yes.
Because the state changed the system 3 times. Like, they're like, register using this. Just kidding. Hang on. Don't send in the sheet. Use this website. Well, no, we didn't. So we have a lot of this information from those 3 different registration versions that had to be done. That has to be done by October 1st. Now, for the Newell, for the associations we manage, we'll do that for our, and this is also only for condos. The HOAs don't have to do this, unless I'm mistaken on that.
HOAs have been left alone this year.
Yes. That's the reason we're focusing on condos. Last year was an HOA year. This year's a condo year. So we'll do that by October 1st. It's on the DBPR website. We haven't done it yet. And for all the Newell managers, we're going to develop an internal department that is going to do that for you.
Nice.
Well, I mean, otherwise, how are we going to do it? This is one of those things that, and I will wager that there's going to be a 60% rate of compliance on this. Statewide. I would say 40% of associations will be out of compliance on October 1st with this.
Yeah.
So I would have had a higher number before. I was reading some statistics that this was 10 years ago or more. This was when I first had started working at Newell, and I knew I was going to acquire it. And I went to some business development meeting, and they talked about the largest percentage of associations. This was, and it was I won't give their name. It's the largest management company in the United States. And they were giving this thing, and they said that the biggest competitor they have, which obviously is the biggest company in the United States, so I guess whatever, but was unmanaged association. That there were more associations that were unmanaged than were managed, as a percentage.
Yeah.
Let's say this largest management company in the United States has 15% market share. There was like a 35% market share of self-managed associations. I would have to think that number has come down substantially because of all of this legislation that has been pushed.
Especially in Florida.
So I think a lot of these associations have management companies. The management companies are going to be aware of the October 1st deadline and will comply with it.
Hopefully.
I think where you're going to run into and now most of your on-site managers go to classes. They know that this is coming up. They'll comply with it. Where you're going to run into the issues with the small associations that, they budget $5,000 a year to handle all their management and accounting or something like that, and they don't have any expertise to tell them about that.
Right.
There are director classes that they are required to go to.
Truthfully, if they did it last year or this year, because June 30th was the deadline for
they'll have an update that they're supposed to.
Yeah.
So anyway, DBPR is requiring condo registration. That's kind of the bottom line to it. October 1st. We're going to take care of that internally for our clients. All right. This one I mentioned at the very beginning because I'm letting Kyla take it. My Safe Florida. So my background with My Safe Florida is I heard about it 2 years ago. I don't know. When I heard about it. Thought it was the best thing. I'm like, okay, we're going to apply for this. And I had some associations that I thought were going to meet it. We couldn't get anybody to get any money. We just kind of gave up.
It was not an easy process. It basically, the bill allows for the state of Florida to provide a grant to associations. I believe it's $2 for every dollar spent by the association.
But just to confirm, it's not free money. Well, I guess all money that you're given is free, but you have to spend money to get this.
Right.
So if you wanted to do, at the time, we were trying to push for window projects.
Yes.
And I remember that ended up becoming a problem because I think they got excluded or something. Well, the association's going to spend $100,000 on these windows. The state's going to put in $200,000 on these windows, and that's the My Safe Florida project.
The goal of this project or this program was to allow for hurricane safe openings, apertures, and roofs as well, so that if you had an association that didn't necessarily have all the funds to make your building hurricane safe, then the state was going to help you. But they had some really strong criteria and really strong requirements to fulfill. Very hard for many associations. And so I think the state kind of clarified and made it a little bit easier, but didn't necessarily just say, let's open the gates, right? Because they don't have all these funds. They funded it more, but it wasn't as much as they should have. So condominium, they redefined the definition because we have some to exclude detached units. What we think about condominiums, they're usually units that are on top of each other. But I have some clients that are lots that are condominiumized. And so it was obvious to me, but it didn't say it in the statute, that if you are lots that are condominiumized, you are not part of this. And so now the statute was changed to say that for sure. Milestones and SIRS, it says that you cannot apply for this if you are required to do milestones and SIRS and you haven't done it. Now, I mean, SIRS, yes, everybody has to have it done by a certain date. But what if you're a condo that's not yet hit your 30th birthday? I don't know. I'm not sure. Does that mean you have to do it beforehand because you want to be part of this? I don't know yet. Previously, it required 100% approval of all unit owners in that structure to even start this process. That was lowered to 75% approval of the unit owners in that structure. So if you've got a condo with several buildings, weirdly enough, some buildings might be able to do it while others won't. So how is that for uniformity? That's going to be interesting too. It clarifies that the grants must be matched on a basis of $1 from the association, $2 from the state. It eliminated restrictions that grant contributions for roof-related projects is $11 per square foot, not to exceed 1,000. So it eliminated all these limitations of how much could be spent on stuff. And it basically said, if you can get this vote and if you can follow this process that we're doing, then you can get this grant. Those are some big ifs, by the way. And then it says grants for water mitigation. It only allows to grant funds to be used for water intrusion, mitigation devices, or improvements that will result in a mitigation credit, discount, or other rate differential.
Oh, good luck with that. And I don't know of any flood prevention device that gives any credits.
Exactly. So, and the mitigation improvements must be made to all openings, including exterior doors, garage doors, windows, and skylights, if doing so is necessary for the building or structure to qualify. for the
Okay.
mitigation credit. So those were the big ticket items. By the way, I'm reading off of a summary that my firm has done, and I'm not sure if I sent it to you. It's definitely on our website. I'll send it to you.
Send it to me again. We will
Yeah.
include it.
Yeah, so it's a full summary of the bill, not just for the MySafe Florida, but all of the bills that are affecting condos, HOAs.
Have you had anyone able to get any MySafe Florida money?
Not any of my clients. I have heard of other attorneys and some of my colleagues, but it was not an easy process.
Yeah, we kind of have determined that. Well, also, one thing we learned: if you want to hire a grant writer, they're really expensive. Like they make the attorneys look, no offense, they make your
Oh,
attorney
no.
look inexpensive.
Well, I mean, it really depends on how much money you're getting, right?
Yeah, and so when we were trying for larger ones, we
Yeah.
did use a grant writer, and we will probably try again because the threshold was lowered to that 75%, which will make it easier.
Yeah.
All right. Last but not least, dangerous dogs.
Dangerous dog.
593.
93, it says mandatory confiscation. So the new bill amends Chapter 767. It eliminated the discretion of animal control on whether or not to confiscate a dog after a severe attack. So under the statute, the animal that is subject to the dangerous dog investigation and has killed a human being or has bitten a human being and left a bite mark that has a score of 5 or higher on the Dunbar bite scale must be immediately confiscated by animal control. I didn't know there was a bite scale. But there is a bite scale, and it has to score 5 or higher. I think if you Google, you can find bite scale. Yes, a level 5 bite is defined as a multiple bite incident with at least 2 level 4 bites, or multiple attack incident with at least 1 level 4 bite in each. So what is it? What is the bite? My understanding is it's like how many inches or centimeters it goes into
And
your
the
skin.
depth of the puncture.
Yes, I'm not really sure who's doing the calculation and who's doing the measuring, but that's basically what it is. And if it doesn't rise to that occasion, then the animal control person can still say no. They can say no.
All right. So I think that covers the most of our high-level topics for the legislative change. We'll make sure to include Varnum Law's brief with an email that will go out to all of our Noopers, and we look forward to having our brain trust meeting with the whole group.
Definitely.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you for
you.
having me.
Thank you.